Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be with all of you today. I have an amazing guest on today. And before I do her formal introduction, I just want to say, this is, of course, Tasha's second appearance on Stories That Inspire Us. And I really had to have her back to continue the conversation. And she's an amazing guest. You all will love her. Her story goes way beyond inspiration to helping others. So I want to welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us podcast, the messenger of hope, Tasha Wilson. Welcome back, Tasha.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited.
Yeah, of course, it was about 5 months ago on September 24th when we did your first podcast. And your story, I'm still getting a lot of amazing feedback, of course, from your first podcast. And I just want to start out by saying that really there is such depth and meaning and a lot of soul purpose of being the messenger of hope.
Mm-hmm.
That is, when I say that, and when I think of you in the same premise of saying that, I feel almost like it's a weight on your shoulders, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about the hope behind the message. And of course, you have many accolades, of course. You're an international bestseller. Your book Shatterproof is doing quite well. You're a speaker. You're an entrepreneur. And what stood out to me from, obviously, a lot of things from your first podcast was you mentioned that you began to question whether or not you deserved any happiness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I am almost sad when I say that, but also so inspired by what you do, because you survived a sexual assault. And that's where all those questions began to come into play. And I feel that on a personal level as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you can bring us up to date and kind of go a little bit more into that. And now, as the messenger of hope, you are just spreading the love.
Yeah. So I think for me, and it's interesting that we're here at this point because I literally had a conversation with one of the students that I work with. So aside from the other things that I do, I work at a university where I serve in a position to hold space for students who have been sexually violated. And it gives me so much hope, honestly, which is so, kind of cliche because that's who I am. But for me, it gives me the whole point of my being that, what I've experienced, I didn't understand then, because all of the trauma that came with it. But now it's like my aha moment, if you will. Like I had to go through that process. I had to channel my emotions and address them. I had to really face the questions that I had. So now I can be in a different space to help others who are going through the same thing. And so, after the sexual assault, the person I once knew before the trauma no longer existed. I forgot about her. I forgot about the little girl that was full of life, that just was so fearless, that, found joy and contentment with who she was. I forgot about her because I allowed one incident to rob me of that innocence. And so I realized after a while that I no longer wanted that incident to control me. I no longer wanted it to control my emotions, my actions, my behavior, or my identity any longer. And so I had to face the reality, which was to actually go through the process instead of avoiding it. And what that looked like for me was unlearning the behaviors that were associated to the sexual assault. Because for me, I felt like love was misconstrued. I felt like I just had to accept any and every type of attention. I felt like I was damaged goods. And so I had to go back to the reminder of who was I before, that situation took place, and how does that complement who I am now? And so I realized that once I stripped away the incident, it was that, what if this never happened? Tasha, who would you have become at this point? If that never happened, how would you feel about building genuine relationships with people? How would you feel about yourself? And so once I got into that mindset of shifting from autopilot and now saying, how can I thrive in something that was meant to destroy me? But now, how can I use it to rebuild me? And so, I really started using affirmative language. I put the mirrors back up in my apartment. I started, saying things that I once loved about myself, and I started saying it so I could start retaining it and then start believing it and then start operating as that. And so, before, when I was like, okay, Tasha, you're damaged goods. And I was like, no, I'm not. I actually have life and I actually have purpose and there's meaning to my story. And so really learning how to reverse the language and start having it in my mind to say, I can do this. Even if I do have tough moments, the point of the matter is that I can get back up and keep going. And I'm not going to allow the person who did this to me to live in my head rent free anymore.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to touch upon something that you had mentioned, because there are so many different channels to tune into. Some we should turn them off, some we need to turn them on, some we need to adjust the volume. So I love what you said about not having that person live rent-free in your mind anymore. But channeling those emotions is very it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And and it really is a process. And I know that, for me, it was a process as well. But as you had mentioned, as we look back on different events that have happened in our lives, where would I be today if I hadn't been through what I've been through,
Hmm.
no matter what that be?
Yeah.
But that, I think, for a lot of people, and even today, as I'm talking about it, it still will always bring up some feelings.
Hmm.
Now, I feel that I have the necessary tools to channel that into a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think for me, it was about honesty, being honest with myself, and actually grieving the moment. I think, for me, it was one of those, if I can erase it out of my mind, that mean it didn't happen. And, being honest to say, yeah, it did happen. And yes, it made me feel sad. And yes, it made me feel angry, and actually grieve, what happened to me. And I think when giving myself permission to feel and then giving myself permission to grieve, it then says, I now have the freedom to explore life outside of that. Um, because once you give yourself permission, you now take back the control and the ownership of your journey. And, that's why I said I no longer could let that person live in my head rent free, because that meant I allowed that person to continue to dominate where I was heading in life. While they were out here doing their thing and God knows with whomever, I'm still allowing that moment to make me feel stuck. And I didn't like that anymore. And I think it caused me to become to a point of being fed up with the same cycle over and over again and expecting different results. And it just
Right.
didn't work out for me anymore. And to be quite honest, sometimes when people see me now, they think that my process was overnight. Absolutely not. I was sexually assaulted at 18, and it wasn't until the age of 30 I decided to make the intentional start of how I wanted to live my life.
And when you begin to process that, and it's a process for everyone, because let's face it, there is a lot of fear associated with when we go back to different things that have happened. But I want to point out something that you touched upon in your first podcast was, for you had to explore the
Mhm.
power of fearlessness.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so growing up, I was always a child that was really shy, reserved, um, always had people speak for me, whether it was my older sibling, older cousins, and things like that. And so um, I got comfortable in that. But then, once you venture out on your own, high school, going to college, you're now trying to discover your own voice and learning how to speak up for yourself. And so when you're learning about who you are and what you want to do, and then you're hit with sexual assault, it kind of caused me to revert back to hiding in a shell. No longer wanting to speak up or say anything because I was afraid of what everyone would say or what everyone would think. And so uh for me, I had to kind of tap into, um if I'm going to allow myself to be silent, then I am now allowing other people to speak on my behalf, their version of my story instead of what truly happened. And so that fearlessness, it challenged me to say, am I going to live vicariously through others or live through their perspective of what took place? Or am I going to own it? And so, even with my voice shaking, even, being anxious and looking around the room, I had to get to a point of, I'm going to say this no matter what. I don't care who's in the room. I don't care what people think or feel, but I know that what I'm stating is my truth and no one can take that from me. And so it started with journaling, writing it out, getting comfortable with laying it all out on paper. And then connecting with groups to see, are other people feeling this way? Are there, commonalities with how they're processing things the way that I am? And then finally getting to a point to say, is it worth the risk? And to me, I believe that it was. It was like, I'm just going to put it out there. If I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell it candidly, but I'm going to tell it in a way where it doesn't seem like I am defeated by this. Even if I'm in that moment of going through up and down emotions, I'm going to say, you know what? Here's the strength in my story. Because even though this may not be a good day for me, I'm still going to tell you what happened because I know that someone else can resonate with that. And so realizing that, when you're being fearless, it's not the absence of fear, but it's saying, I'm still going to do it anyway because it's worth the risk.
I love how you said that, because, you know, I think a lot of times we ask ourselves, is it really worth the risk? But if our story resonates within ourselves, and if we're honoring our journey in such a way where we can inspire others, even with that maybe slight hesitation to share the story, but yet we go out there and share it, our stories, of course it's worth the risk.
Mhm.
It takes a lot to get there, though. And as you said, this did not happen overnight.
No, not at all. And in hindsight, when I look back, some people could say, oh my gosh, that was a long time, but I wasn't ready, and when you're doing life and you're living it through the lens of trauma, you don't realize how much time goes by, honestly. It's not until you want something different or you want to feel different, that that light bulb comes off to say, okay, how can I do something that I've never done before? And that's what it took for me. I went through failed relationships and it just didn't feel good anymore. And it was kind of like, why am I wasting my time with people who don't really know who I am, who don't really want to get to know who I am? And why do I feel like there's pressure for me to prove my worth to them, you know? And so I got tired of doing that. I'm like, am I going to live my whole existence trying to prove my worth to people who really don't matter? Or am I going to move through life and proving my worth to myself? And that's what mattered to me.
And you know, when things like that happen, and you mentioned the light bulb, think about that, how the light bulb goes on, right?
Hmm.
We could switch it on and off.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, there's still days when I've got to turn it off,
Yeah.
kind of pause for reflection. And I also want to touch upon the process that you went through, because you had mentioned journaling, and I love to journal. And I really believe that journaling really is when we put when we put our thoughts from pen to paper. And I know a lot of people like to journal on their devices, and there is an app for that, right? But there's so much to be said about that time with yourself when you're in solitude. Maybe there's some music, soothing music playing, in your journaling, and that connection with your thoughts, with the process of grieving what you've been through, that you were able to, here's another Tasha-ism, break through glass ceilings.
Yeah. Yeah. I think because sometimes our environment and sometimes society can, teach us subconsciously to just be busy, and to always keep moving or, um, in a way, dismiss what's happening around us. And journaling taught me how to slow down. It taught me how to pace myself. And it also taught me how to sit with myself. Because throughout the day, so many thoughts and ideas and emotions can go through your mind, but where do you put them, And for me, journaling was that safe space for me to dump everything that I was thinking, everything that I was feeling, and putting it on the paper to reflect. And for me, all of the old journals that I have, I still keep them because I always use them as a reference point to say, wow, there were days that I truly did not like or love myself. And I'm so proud of the progression that I've made, or, using it as a reference point to help others who may be at the point where they're like, I don't really know who I am today. I don't even know if I really want to show up today, and tell them it's okay to have those moments. I've been there, and share with them, here's the proof, because a lot of times when people don't see the messy side of your story, but then they see the other part of your story where they're like, but you're always so, happy, or always so joyful, or always, and I'm like, it was work to get to a point of having a genuine smile on my face. And it's still work, because I don't want people to think that even when you get to a point of progression, that everything you once felt fades away. Because for me, when the season comes around, when the sexual assault happened, it could be little things that would remind me about it. But the thing is, I honor how I feel in that moment. And I give myself permission to say it's okay to have this moment. And then I work through it.
And that's so important what you just said. You have to honor that moment and work through it. And that's where a lot of the work that we have done or that you have gone through will kind of lead us in the direction. Like, we probably know what we want, in a sense of, okay, I need to kind of step back for a few moments and really allow myself to process what I've been through. And
Mhm.
as you said, the season of when the sexual assault occurred, I resonate with that as well, because it does come up in different situations. It may be a song that comes on the radio, it may be in the store and see something that reminds me, or somebody, whatever. The point I'm trying to make is, whatever it is, we need to kind of maybe turn off the light switch for a few minutes
Yeah.
and give ourselves that opportunity to kind of catch up with our thoughts and to honor how we are feeling.
Hmm. Yeah,
In,
absolutely.
in your book, Shatterproof, what would you when you sat down, or the day, for instance, that it went live?
Yeah.
And by the way, I just want to segue just for a moment and welcome all of our amazing listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. I see some familiar names, so thank you all so much for being here. Tasha, what I was trying to get at was the day, like you're sitting in your office or wherever you may be, and Shatterproof goes live. What was your feeling in that moment? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah. It was a combination of excitement, nerves, and like, wow, did this just happen? So so yeah, a little bit of shock there. And it's interesting because I experienced that through all of my books, but I think for this one, because I tapped into a part of my life that only a few close people already knew. And so for me to publicly put it on display, and that was my thoughts and perspective of romantic relationships and what I desire for myself, but yet I'm still recognizing where I am. And so that's where that shatterproof came in as for me a reminder that um I'm not choosing to settle, because of my experiences and regardless of what my history may have been with being sexually assaulted, I still desire and I still have the capacity to have the relationship that I want in my life. And so the same way I'm intentional about my friendships, the same way that I'm intentional about even my business relationships and my family, why not have that same intentionality when it comes to being romantically involved with someone? And so in that book, I laid it all on the table, the fear and the thoughts that I've once had and how I'm no longer allowing myself to be a victim to just accept anything goes mentality, but to say, you know what? If I can conquer the other things and become more self aware as to who I am and really understand who I am and know my worth, then I know that I'm worthy of being with someone who can recognize that too. And so I kind of go into myth busters and things that people have once told me and, combating those things. I've even um, challenged, how some people may think that they're doing you a service of inserting their opinion about it, but then it's really becoming detrimental because when some people try to create a timetable for you as to how that process and that journey should go, it makes you question your own, right? It makes you question, and what I'm doing is wrong, is there a different way to go about this? But it's really setting the expectation for yourself, not compromising that expectation, because at the end of the day, you know what you need, you know what you want, and you know what you desire. And no one can tell you that but you.
That is so true. And you had mentioned capacity,
Hmm.
and I was right. And I'm trying to read through my notes and I think when we realize our own worth, we have the capacity to have that compassion for ourselves.
Hmm.
And expectations, I feel, when I say expectations, I feel a weight. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because of the own insinuations or blocks that we are putting on ourselves. I'm
Hmm.
assuming. And
Hmm.
you are, of course, the messenger of hope. Have have your clients ever experienced, or have you ever been in that situation where your expectations, maybe you thought, okay, this is where I'm going, but I didn't meet this expectation, but it's okay because it led me in a different direction.
Oh yeah. I can attest to that personally and even working with clients. And so on a personal level, um, I'll even use something school, right? Something that is as common, I would say, is, you're told, oh, you're going to finish college in 4 years, and then you find a career, you get married, you have a family. So my expectation was, I'm going to finish college in 4 years. Did I meet that expectation? No. I graduated college in 5 years and it was okay. I initially was upset with myself. I tore myself down and was like, people are going to think you're stupid. People are going to think that you didn't focus and, because that was familiar behavior to talk down on yourself, the negative self-talk. And so I had to stop in the middle of me criticizing and critiquing myself to say, no, Tasha, wait a minute. Who told you? Who set that mandate for you to finish in 4 years? Is that something that somebody else perceived and you took it on for yourself? Your journey is not going to look like anyone else's. So why are you allowing yourself to stress out over a timeline that you didn't create for yourself in the first place? And so I had to realize it didn't matter when or how I finished, but I finished. That was the ultimate goal. And to make sure that I finished successfully based on what success looked like for me. And so I had to really honor the fact that throughout my college experience, I was sexually assaulted and yet no one knew about it because I didn't share or disclose until after, I graduated. So it's one of those things that you have to say, hey, through all of these things that you've experienced, you still finished and you still finished strong. To finish with honors on my timeline versus what everyone else told me that I should have been done with. And, that's just one example. Another expectation is finding a career, getting married, having a family. And for me, the career that I thought that I was going to do was more so of a laughable moment. I thought that I was going to be a teacher in a classroom. And, I just had it all set out and was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I get into the classroom and I hated it. And I was just like, okay, this is not for me because I've always been creative. I've always been innovative. But when I was in the classroom, of course, everything was tailored to standardized testing. So that made me feel boxed in. It didn't allow me to meet the students where they were in a way that learning would make sense for them. And so I started volunteering and looking at other opportunities to say, how can I meet with people and connect with them in a way that's meaningful for them, where they don't lose their sense of wonder within this. And I'm not necessarily teaching for them to pass the test. And so that's how I landed into social work, into the mental health, and then channeling my personal experiences in my books. And so for me, that was more rewarding. And so it's kind of like, when you set expectations, also be open and willing for pivots to occur because there's a reason why the pivot is happening.
That is so true. And I just got a chill when you said that, beware of those pivots, because you think, and I've shared this often with my son's story, in that moment when his accident happened, I was on top of the world
Hmm.
and everything changed. And that's okay in the grand scheme of things, because that pivot, excuse me, that experience has led me to where I am today. Obviously, I wish that never happened to my son, but
Hmm.
I am so blessed and grateful to be where I am, that he is doing well, and
Yeah.
that has meaning. And that pivot, while I didn't expect it, happened.
Hmm.
I want to talk about success for a moment. Because you had mentioned, what success had looked like for you. Where do you see your success maybe in a year from now? Is there another book? Is there a project you're working on?
Yeah, so another book for sure. Um and it's funny because I'm already receiving like nuggets as to, ooh, write this down. You're going to include that in the book. Um and again, a lot of my books are birthed from right now experiences. And so um right now I'm at a unique crossroad in my career where I have been so accustomed to doing what was familiar that I now want to expand to do something that's beyond what's familiar and comfortable for me. And so that book is really going to highlight and talk about that and streamline that it doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in your career, that it's okay to want more, and it's okay to look for more. And so, because for me, with my background, I've always been on an interface level in my professional career from about 9 to 5, but now it's one of those moments where I want to go beyond that. And so, the liberty that I have in the marketplace with being a speaker, being a coach, and being an author, I want that same liberty in my 9 to 5. And so, how can I find the parallels in that? What do I need to do to get there? And so that's where I'm at right now. And so my book is going to channel that process of, others who may be feeling the same way. Because when you've done something for, I don't know, like 20 years, it's kind of like, there's more to my life than this, and I can still reach people and connect with them with my story, but tailored in a different way. And so, really looking at things from a bigger scheme of that part. And so, there's going to be another book. There's going to be more speaking opportunities. I am more so looking at international opportunities more within the year, bigger stages, more collaboration and partnerships with others outside of the regions that I've already been working with. Um, I'm even looking at doing a documentary about how I got started and where I am now, so people can really take more of a deep dive into my life. I'm someone who is very transparent, authentic, open book. And so I just think it's very important for people to see that instead of, seeing there's a lot of people who see what we do from a surface lens, but they don't really know how we do it. And so I am one of those authentic voices for people to say, there's no magic formula, but this is how I do it. And I think being open, being honest, and being yourself is what makes your story more impressionable than trying to fit the mold of someone you're not.
Mm. Tasha, would you say that in essence, you are raising that glass ceiling?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's funny because I always say it's about being at the right place at the right time, and making sure that you show up no matter what is where these moments occur for me to raise the glass ceiling. And I say that because I shared with this a little bit in our first podcast, but I had lost my dad when I was 16, and never in a million years would I've known that the organization who actually contributed to my academic completion had invited me to serve on the board. And so I'm sitting here and I'm candidly just doing things because that's who I am. It's ingrained in my core. And people are watching, people are seeing me out here in the community. People are seeing me connecting with people and building relationships, and they want to be a part of that. And so um, this is for anyone who thinks that what you're doing is not enough, or you think that the small amount of things that you're doing don't add up to big things. They do, because people are watching you. You may not realize they're watching you, but they are. And when they see you authentically doing what you love, not for accolades, but just for your being, they want to partner with you. And so um, a lot of times people are like, what? I know this person. I talk to her all the time and I'm seeing her doing this, I'm seeing her doing that. And I'm like, whoa. And in unconventional spaces. And so that's what really raises the glass ceiling.
When you say, I love that, by the way, when you say unconventional places
Hmm.
and people are looking at you,
Hmm.
what is one additional thing that they may not know about you?
So, and I know I shared this with you before, but as communicative that I am, as much of a community oriented person that I am, I'm an introverted at heart. And so I love my intimate spaces. I love, you know, having a few close people by, you know, but yet at the same breath, when I am doing things that make a difference, I get recharged out of that. So people would never know that I'm an introvert. It's like people who see me on a day to day, like my nieces and my nephew, and I am just really reserved. I'm kind of to myself, and I just kind of, I do my own thing. But then when they see me in action, they always say it's like a Power Ranger, right? It's like you kind of put on your costume and then you you turn into a different persona. But the interesting part is that it's always been in me. It's just that I am not one to feel that my accolades have to speak for me. I always feel like who I am as a person and how I make others feel. That's what speaks for me, and the accolades are just the bonus.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Tasha, where can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
So my website, www.lifewithtashaw.com. That's a great way to message me about anything, whether it's a speaking opportunity, working together, receiving coaching services, or just generally asking for advice. That's a great way. Another way is Instagram. I'm on there way more than Facebook, but it's Life with Tasha W_. And that way you'll see more peaks of my personal life and not just the business side of me. And then if you feel obliged, Facebook, I have my group, Tasha W. Messenger of Hope.
Well, thank you so much for that. And of course, I will make sure all that information gets in the show notes. Tasha, your story continues to evolve, but it continues to inspire me in such a way. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing your very raw and authentic story, because as I envisioned your glass ceiling lifting and lifting, get ready, girlfriend. It's going to be amazing. It's already amazing now, but your story continues to inspire me. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being the messenger of hope. And thank you for rediscovering you in such a way that you've created that ripple effect to inspire others. Thank you for being on Stories That Inspire Us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the time to share my story and connect with you again.
Oh, you are so welcome. Well, folks, the power of the story goes way beyond sometimes what we thought we could share. And why not share your story in such a way that honors your journey? I encourage you, if you want to reach out to Tasha, please do so. And like I said, all of her information will be in the show notes. Get in contact with her. And of course, if you want to share your story, I would love to hear from you, because your story is that important. These are the stories that inspire us. And today I continue to be amazed way beyond so much, because that glass ceiling is raising and Tasha's story continues to inspire me. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. And we shall see you again real soon. Thanks again, Tasha. Bye for
Thank
now,
you.
everyone. You're welcome.